Ben here with PointByPatrol, and today I'm going to show you how to replace your valve cover gasket. But in addition to that, I'm also replacing the valve cover on my car with this valve cover that's been Cerakoted by Two-Step Performance. And there are two reasons why I'm doing this. One is for aesthetics, and the other is I may potentially have an issue with the PCV valve on my stock valve cover. So the aesthetic piece first. Doing my best to kind of match up to these new wheels that I bought for the car. And while it's not a perfect match, I think it'll still kind of pop. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, as I mentioned before, is I think that I might be having a problem with the PCV valve on my stock valve cover gasket. Reason for that is that I'm getting a little bit of leakage on the bottom of my turbocharger that's coming out of either the V-band, it's hard to tell, it's very slow, or it's coming out of the actual drain area. This was really exacerbated when I installed the Radium dual catch can kit, which had catch cans for the OCV side and the PCV side. Immediately after installation, when I took it for a test drive, the car was billowing smoke out of the back, under and off boost. And so I removed the OCV catch can, and I stopped seeing smoke shooting out of the back of the car. But I left the PCV catch can on for a little while longer, and I was still experiencing a leak from the turbo. So I got with 271 Performance, and we actually sent the turbo back to them for inspection. They inspected the turbo, they replaced the CHRA, but they didn't really see any problems with the turbocharger itself. Everything was still within spec, which points to the fact that the Radium catch can setup caused issues. I should have probably pulled off the PCV side Radium catch cans sooner than I did. Though it did catch oil, I think the stock setup, after the experience that I had, is probably the best way to go. Now, the reason that I think that I might be having a problem with the stock PCV valve, which is built into the valve cover, I don't know how the Radium catch can really interfaced with that, and it could have caused an issue with it. So since I'm still getting a very slight seepage coming out of the turbocharger, I'm gonna do what I think's best. We're gonna replace the valve cover and the valve cover gasket. So if you want to know how to replace a valve cover gasket, this video is great for that. It doesn't matter if you're putting the stock valve cover back on or replacing it with another one. The process is essentially the same. We're going to start first by loosening our negative terminal. And we're just going to set this out of the way. We want the battery disconnected for this job since we're going to be messing with some electronic connectors further along in the process. Next, we're going to move over here to address this, to get this out of the way. So a top tip for you, and I'm getting a little bit more light on this. This is a tamper-proof head. You can see where I've already replaced this one, because this one would have been tamper-proof as well as this one. But it's time to replace this one as well. But to loosen these, you need a pair of pliers. And it's kind of tedious, but you basically have to sit here with your pair of pliers and rotate this. And it can take a while. Like I said, it's pretty tedious. And I cannot wait to replace this one with a real worm drive clamp that actually has a serviceable head on top of it, so that if I ever have to do this again, it just makes my life easier and I don't have to sit here and fool around with these pliers, which is just a waste of time. See how much easier that is? There. And I'm going to work that out of the way. You'll notice mine's a little bit different. This is part of the Radium catch can setup where they have you replace this hose. The trouble is with the barb fitting that they put in here, this is now a permanent thing on my car instead of going back to the factory. Otherwise, I would have to buy this line since it's already been stretched open. So you shouldn't have to do anything with this because it will connect here. You should still have enough play to get it out of the way. So for now, that's out of our way. And this clamp is in the trash. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to move over to start working on getting some of this wiring out of the way. And so we're going to need to disconnect our AC compressor, our wastegate actuator, and this solenoid in here. There's also two 10mm screws that we're going to have to take out. And you're also going to want to pull this part of the vacuum hose out of the way. So disconnect that and just kind of get it out of the way for now. And then we'll get to these guys. I've chosen to use a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 6-inch extension. It does kind of help get in here. We're going to set it to loosen. There we go. This lower one can be tricky, but with this extension and with the 10mm wobble, we can easily get around the AC line. Try to take some care here not to drop the bolt, but it does happen. Got it. Now I'm going to unplug our wastegate. So that's loose now. Gonna pull this the rest of the way out. It's held in 3 different places. This vacuum hose here that goes to your blow-off valve. And then unclip that solenoid there. And kind of the tricky part here is going to be the reach down to the AC compressor. It is tight. You really kind of want to make sure that you do this with a cool engine bay so that you don't burn yourself. Okay, so that's disconnected. And I can start to pull this up and get it out of the way. There we go. I'm trying to take some care around this vacuum line here. I don't want to rip it, but I do want to get this guy up and out. There, so we have this portion of our wiring harness disconnected. So we're going to work on the back side of the wiring harness now, and there is a green clip here that is not easily accessible that clips onto the back of the intake manifold, and I don't want it pinching that wire anymore because I need to disconnect that wire. So if you look down in here, here's the green clip that I'm talking about, and it connects to this vacuum switching valve right here on the back of the intake manifold. And in order to get this clip off, you can either use a pick or your fingernail. And I'm probably gonna have to turn off the flashlight here because this is one of those jobs that probably requires 2 hands, but I can lift up on this tab with my pick, and then I'm gonna start to pull up on the wire from both sides. And what it does is it begins to loosen the clip. And I might have to use a fingernail here just to get some better pressure on this guy. But I'm trying to get back here so that I can do that. And so in my case, unfortunately, the clip broke because it was dry and brittle. But if your clip isn't dry and brittle, it shouldn't break like that. Either way, not a big deal. I'll get another clip from Honda. I'm not a big fan of breaking clips, but there was no way that you were going to be able to get that clip off from the backside without really marring it up. So unfortunately, heat won, but not to worry. I will get another one, and at this point, I don't care if I break the clip. Next is we're going to unplug the vacuum switching valve, and you have to push really hard on the backside right here. You push hard. You need 2 hands. I have to kind of get where the camera is. There, and it comes off just like so. So that guy's off, but there are several other connectors down here. So I think at this point it makes sense to move our coolant tank out of the way. We're not going to have a lot of wiggle here, but it's enough to get in here. If you look here, you'll notice a 10mm bolt that you need to be able to get to on the side of the engine block that holds this part of the wiring harness and then connects to a connector right down here. So it's time to get that off. So now that is loose, and I can reach in here and disconnect my connector. And it is hard to show you while I'm doing this, so there, that's out of the way. So pretty easy, not too hard. Then on top of our VTEC solenoid, there's another gray connector right here. I'm gonna go ahead and reach in and disconnect that connector. Back here, and I'll get my flashlight out to show you. There's a connector down here, straight down, that you need to disconnect. That's right there. And then there's a green connector below that one. So there are quite a few connectors, these are all of them, that you need to disconnect. Now there are several more wire ties here holding things together, but there's also a bracket with a 10mm bolt. And I think what I'm gonna do is just take off the whole bracket to get it out of my way and leave those lines connected so that we don't end up like this clip did. Come on. And there's a second 10mm holding it down here at the bottom. Again, this is really hard to show you. You're gonna have to look for it, but it is part of the same bracket. So I need to go for that. And I'm able to see now too that there is also a connector that goes to what would appear to be my fuel rail pressure sensor. That's gonna have to get disconnected too, as that's kind of part of all of this wiring conglomeration. It's a long bolt. And now this whole medley is loose, except for the connector that is going to my fuel pressure regulator, which I will disconnect next. And it doesn't look like it's going to be very easy to get my hands down in there. And from what I can tell, it also has a safety lock on it to make my day even better trying to get this thing loose. So I am going to have to figure out how to disable the safety lock so that I can successfully get it to come apart. I need a little more wiggle, so there's this top green connector right here that's on the back of the, it connects to the actual valve cover itself. I'm gonna get a pocket screwdriver. I should be able to walk this one out, unlike what I would have been able to do with this guy right here that got brittle on me. There, I was able to get it out without breaking it. With this bracket off, I should be able to actually pinch some of these and get the bracket out of the way, because I think that's ultimately impeding my progress to get into this fuel rail pressure sensor. So I can do that with just my fingernails, get this bracket out of my way. I do apologize, it's dark back here and it's hard to get light so that you can see what I'm doing. So that's out of the way. And now back to focus on this fuel rail pressure sensor that has that nice little safety lock on it in a very precarious place where it's not very easy to get my fingernails into. All right, so I was able to rock the lock back. Now let me see if I can work the connector off. There we go. So, very important. Here's the trick. This lock right here, you need to be able to get your fingernails on it and pull it back like I did there. I can't push it forward right now, but I'd be willing to bet that I can push it forward once it's reconnected. But either way, basically, and it's in this orientation in the car, so you can barely see this yellow. So you need to be able to get your fingers back like this, pull it back, and then press, and then with both hands, work it backwards. But you see now that our wiring harness is a lot looser. What's holding us up currently is the coil packs. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of those. So there's a little tab right here that you press towards you and it unlocks it from the top. And then we're going to simply unplug our coil packs. So that is now out of the way. And I can lay this off to the side, and that gives me really good access to the rest of the valve cover. I'm also going to keep my coil packs in order. I'm just going to set them here against the windshield. So I've got cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then what we're going to do is loosen our PCV line right here. So we're going to pull that off, and to be on the safe side, and you do have to be careful with this. I don't know how Honda makes their rubber tubing, but it's drier than the Sahara, and what that means is when you go to break it loose, oftentimes it's going to rip the hose before it actually breaks loose on the bung that it's connected to. So I just need to very carefully, not a lot of pressure, work on this, and as I'm working, I'm going to start pulling it back just a little bit. And there it is. So you can see just this residue right here, and that residue is from inside of this hose itself. So that stuff really gets on there and it sticks hard. We've also got these lines that are running across. I don't want to disconnect these if I don't have to. I really don't like messing with any of Honda's hoses, just for the mere fact that if you look at them the wrong way, they just fall apart in your hands or rip in half when you're trying to work on them. I think what I can do instead, there's a 10 holding the bracket to the vacuum switching valve, and then these two 10s right here, and that may give me just enough wiggle room so that this comes over to the side. Let's see if that's done the job for us. Yeah, that'll work. So I can lay that over to the side without having to disconnect any of them at all. Now we have excellent access to the valve cover itself. And now we're going to start going around the horn and removing all of these. And that's it. So this is now ready to come off. Before we do that, you're going to want to remove your dipstick and then pull everything off. And we'll show that in just a second. All right, so now we're going to remove the valve cover itself, and there it is. So came off in one piece, no big deal. A couple parts to transfer to the new are this guy that has to get transferred over, and obviously your dipstick and your oil cap. Everything else stays. So the old valve cover gasket stayed on the car, so we're going to pull that off. The next thing that you're going to need to do is clean out any kind of Honda bond that you have, and the Honda bond goes in 4 particular places. So you've got a bead of it right here, you have a bead of it back here, you have a bead of it over in this back corner, and then you have another bead of it in the front right here. So I'm also, once I scrape off this Honda bond, I'm going to wipe up any excess oil that's, as you can see here, trying to come out. I'm just going to wipe that up with a paper towel so that I have a nice clean install. Then we'll get some fresh Honda bond, put it in the same spots. Now the valve cover, you don't set it on the cylinder head itself. You put it in the grooves on the actual valve cover assembly itself, so that when you press down, everything goes smoothly and you're not trying to work it into place, you know, the way that it came out. So we're gonna cut here so that I can clean this up, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I was actually today years old when I learned that the PCV valve is actually this guy right here. I was under the impression that it was actually built into this entire contraption. The good news is it's actually replaceable. So while I'm sitting here feeling like a fool, at the same time, I get to put on a really pretty valve cover and also get to show you how to replace your valve cover gasket. So I'll go to Honda and get one of those so that I can replace that. In the meanwhile, I think I'll just enjoy my valve cover gasket, my new valve cover. So apologies on that. The good news is it is replaceable and I was incorrect, but it's not your money, it's my money. So you get to be forewarned since I was not. So as I'd mentioned before, we're gonna start pressing in the new valve cover gasket into the groove, and it's kind of just a little puzzle. But you want to make sure that these things get fully seated down into here, and you'll understand what I mean when you have it, you know, actually have this thing in your hands for yourself. And you just kind of take your time with it. There's really no need to rush. I haven't put any Honda Bond on the car yet, but I did go ahead and get the oil cleaned up, as well as the dried Honda Bond cleaned up, so that it's almost ready to go for us when we come back. And again, the reason that you want to take your time with this is so that you don't end up stretching it too far in one direction to the point where it doesn't fit well in other spots. You really want it to fit as uniformly as possible. The last thing that I'm going to do before I go and finish the preparation on the cylinder head, on these spark plug tubes right here, I'm just going to dab a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on my finger, and I'm going to kind of go around the tube. That's going to make it a little easier to slip over the spark plug tubes in the car. I'm not using a lot, just enough, just to get a little bit of lubrication in there so that they just slide right on. Now we're going to move on to putting the Honda Bond on the cylinder head itself. And that actually goes in 6 places. I had originally explained that it went in 4, but it does go in 6. Again, most of my videos, most of my how-to videos, I'm doing it for the first time myself and kind of learning as I go. And that way I'm really able to offer the best kind of on-the-spot advice when I'm doing these sort of things. So, you know, if you didn't make it all the way through the video and didn't pick up on some of those parts, then you really are kind of shortchanging yourself. You need to make sure that you watch the video in its entirety, because I will hit you with tips throughout the video. Dab a Honda Bond there, and I'm going to come to the front. Dab a Honda Bond here. Then I'm coming over to this corner. Dab a Honda bond here. And also at the seam here. I'm gonna do a dab of Honda bond. Then, likewise back here. I apologize if I'm blocking your view, but I'm blocking my own, so. What I'm going to do next is just take my finger, kind of just spread, flatten the Honda bond here, just over that seam. And now it's time to come in with our valve cover. Before you do this, just double check that you've got it mushed down as best you can in all the places that you're supposed to have it mushed down. You want to make sure that it doesn't roll out. If it rolls out, you're going to end up with an oil leak, and you're going to be back in here doing this again. So very gently, making sure everything's out of the way. We're going to get back in here and drop this back in place. I'm having to sort of push the seal, even though I lubricated it over the spark plug tubes, just to make sure that it seats. And now what I'm doing is just checking my alignment to make sure that everything looks good there. So I'm happy with that. We're going to start putting bolts back in. And these will further help to align the valve cover where it's supposed to go. Now I'm not tightening these down all the way, but I am getting them down some so that when I come back with my torque wrench, I don't have as many turns to go to get these to seat properly. Okay, so the torque spec for these bolts is either 5.2 foot-pounds or 7 Newton meters. So I've got mine set to 5.2 foot-pounds, and you're gonna work these kind of in a cross pattern. And I'm going to do 2 passes just to be sure. And that's it. I think the new color looks great on this. And I'm not going to bore you with the reassembly here. We're going to simply say you reassembled the same way that it came apart. You just follow the same set of steps that you were following on the way out to put it all back in. So we will follow up with you after everything is back in place here so that you can kind of have a look and see what it looks like. The job is done, and I think everything here looks great. Okay, so that's it. Really not that bad. I think all in, if you weren't having to videotape this entire thing like I just did, this would probably take you about an hour, maybe even less than that. So I really think that this is something that anybody can tackle with some simple tools in their own garage and just save money on labor that way. If you guys have any questions, please put them down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. This has been with the PointByPatrol, and we'll see you next episode.